Hello, my name is Rajiv Priyadarshi and I'm from PR3 Systems. Today we'll be talking about data profiling using Information Analyzer. Before we go into the details of Information Analyzer, let's try to find out what exactly is data profiling. Think of an example. Suppose you're having a headache and you go and take an Advil. Tomorrow you again have a headache, so you again take an Advil. But the third day you are really wondering, is there a sign of a bigger problem? Is my headache not the problem but a symptom of a bigger problem? So what do? You go to the doctor. And what does the doctor do? He's going to ask you questions and then he'll order some tests to identify exactly what the problem is. And once he identifies the problem, then he can give you the medicine to get better. Exactly the same way, in case of data, we have an understanding that there are problems with the data, but we generally don't do much about it. We do not do anything till the time we see a serious repercussion. We might be losing market share, or we are unable to leverage some of our information assets because the quality of our data is not right. So the next thing that we do, just as what the doctor did, was to diagnose what the problem is. And the process of diagnosis of your data to find out what exactly are the data quality issues is called data profiling. And we use Information Analyzer, which is an IBM tool, to find out the issues with your data. And in this presentation, we'll look at the details of how do you go about profiling data and what kind of insights that you can get about your data quality by using Information Analyzer. So whenever we talk about data quality, what are we talking about? We're talking about formats, patterns, wrong addresses, wrong email address, incorrect social security numbers, and so on. What are some of the techniques that we use? We use statistical methods like minimum, maximum, mean, mode, percentile, standard deviation, frequency, variation, etc. We also look at key integrity. Are your primary keys actually primary keys, or do you have duplicates? We will try to do a domain analysis, whether your data, all of the data, is it within a specific domain or do you have some outliers? So by gradually understanding the quality of the data, you can get insights about what you can do to figure out how to solve the problem. So what are the benefits of data profiling? Number one benefit is that it gives you an accurate feedback on the quality of the data. Why is that important? It's important because the quality of decisions depends upon the quality of your data. For example, if I'm driving and I'm on Roosevelt Road, but I do not have a GPS and I thought I was going east, but I'm going west. So the farther I go in the wrong direction, the farther I am for my destination. So exactly, we need to really know what is the quality of your data, because all your decisions that you make based upon the data would have the same quality, and it can cost you a lot of money and effort. The third advantage of data profiling is that your information assets are very critical business assets. In today's world, your information can be your critical differentiator. If you know exactly how to leverage your information about your customers, about your suppliers, about your products, and how it's being used, it can help you to create new products, add new portfolio to what you sell based upon your consumer behavior. So there's a gold mine in your information assets, and you cannot tap into this gold mine unless you trust the data that you have. And also with this whole time of this data security, you got to be very sensitive about all the personal information that you have. And if you are not careful, you could be hacked or you could run into a legal issue. So you got to be very careful on how you handle sensitive information assets. And data profiling can help you to identify where your critical sensitive data is stored, and you can take precautions to mask the data for testing and have additional safeguards for security to protect your sensitive personal information. So let's talk about Information Analyzer. What is Information Analyzer? Information Analyzer is a thick client which runs on your Windows desktop and which connects to the server on the back end, which could be the Windows or Unix, different flavors of Unix. There's also in version Fixpack 1 and 2, there's a new thin client of Information Analyzer which has been introduced, which can also provide some functionality. So right now there's some common functionalities and there's some additional functionalities that you can perform either in the thick client or in the thin client, but the gradual vision is to make sure that your thin client is powerful enough that you can use it for your complete data profiling. So what are some of the kinds of analysis that you can do with your data in Information Analyzer? So you can perform column analysis. So you can analyze a column, exactly what kind of issues with you have the data, what is the minimum value, do we have duplicates, do we have incorrect data, do you have incorrect street addresses, do you have zip codes in the wrong format. A lot of these things can be analyzed in Information Analyzer, and once you identify the problem, you can cleanse the data in quality stage. So unless you identify what the problems are, you cannot fix them. So column analysis and data profiling is a very critical step to understand what are the issues of data quality that you have within your data. So you can also do key and cross-domain analysis. You can identify what keys within your tables could be a primary key, what attributes could be additional primary keys. You can also do a cross-domain analysis. What are the relationships between different tables? So all of that can really help. You can also do a baseline analysis. So for example, you start with the process, you fix some data quality issues, and then you can compare how exactly are you improving with respect to your data quality, and this can be done by using a baseline analysis. You can also implement a lot of data validation rules. So we'll talk about how you can do that in a subsequent presentation in future, but we'll talk about column analysis in this presentation. Information Analyzer uses a common metadata layer which analyzes all information server applications. So whatever analysis information that you can store, it can be leveraged in other tools within the information server suite. So what are some of the essential steps for data profiling using Information Analyzer? So number one step is that you got to make sure that you get the right metadata and you get the connectivity established. And that is done by InfoSphere Metadata Asset Manager, also known as IMAM. We'll talk about that. We'll actually show you how to do that. The second step is to establish connectivity with the data sources to be analyzed and the analysis database where all the analysis results are stored. And once you have established that, you need to import the metadata in IMAM and you need to save the connection details because that is what you'll be using when you do the column analysis. Once you have done all the setup in IMAM, you have to come to Information Analyzer, set your data sources, create an Information Analyzer project, make sure that you got the right settings, and then you start column analysis. We'll see how to analyze your column using this process. You can perform specific analysis on your data, and you can use data rules to constrain and validate your data. Once you have done your analysis, you can review your analysis results very carefully and mark the data as reviewed, and that you can also create notes which could be available outside Information Analyzer. Once you are done with that, you can publish the analysis results that can be used in other information server applications like data stage, quality stage, and information governance catalog. One thing to be understood very clearly is that IBM has got an integrated suite of applications which can help you for your information governance. And data quality is a very important part of your information governance program. So information governance catalog is another application which is a part of information server which can be used to implement your information governance program, and there you can create policies which can be assigned to rules which are there in Information Analyzer, and these rules can also be used for data cleansing within quality stage. So as you can see, all of these could be cross leveraged and used to make sure that you have got an effective data governance program. So let's look at the specifics on how exactly do you go about doing it. See on the other side.
Our goal in this exercise is to analyze the columns for the address table that I just created. So in this example, we'll be using a sample transportation company and which ships and from multiple locations to multiple locations, and we'll see by looking at the address what kind of profiling that we can do, what kind of issues that we have with this address. So the first step for column analysis is to make sure that we import the metadata. Now how do we import the metadata? We import the metadata using the InfoSphere Metadata Asset Manager, also known as IMAM. So let's see how to go to IMAM. So I'm going to search for Launchpad, which is over here. And then once I go to Launchpad, I'm going to click on Metadata Asset Manager. So I give my user ID and password. Once I am here, either I can create a new import area or I can reuse one of the existing import areas, but for the sake of completeness, I'm going to create a new import area. I'm going to call it address. And since I stored the data using DB2, I also have to make sure that the connector is already established, but let's see. So I'm going to come over here and I click next. So typically I might have to choose the data connection object. So I've got a data connection object. I can reuse the data connection object. If I did not have a data connection object, suppose I did not have one, so I'm going to just for example, let's see if I can delete it. So I'll select a new connection. So I create a new data connection. I call it address connect. It's asking me for a database location, so I know that the database is DB2 PR3, and I'm going to give the user ID and password. And I click save password and I say okay. So it did test the connection, made sure that the user ID and password was correct, and I clicked next. So I have to give the host name, which is this machine over here. One of the things that I have seen from experience, I used to give the database name, instance name over here, but I had some challenges, so I don't give the database name and the instance name at this point. I don't know exactly how the internal workings are, but my goal is that once I find out how it works, because this is very sensitive, and I've seen different options which don't work, and I've also talked to IBM tech support about it. But let's see how we do. So I go to next, and I've got two options. Either I can do an express import, which just takes the data from the database, the metadata from the database, and moves it directly to the repository. And in the second case, in manage import, it moves it to the staging area, then you can manually preview, and then you can move it to the repository. I also had issues with that. They both are equally good, but my recommendation would be to use express import. So I choose express import and I click import. So as you can see, it just imported the address area and it's generating the preview. Okay, it says there's some manual review required, so analysis complete, and I click. Okay, so it did not move it to the repository, which is not good. So what I'll do is I've come over here and I click share to repository. Let's see if it works. So right now it is sharing. Okay. So let's stop and then we'll go back to Information Analyzer and try to see if I can get this metadata and the data from the source. So in the previous step, we had created the import area and we had imported the metadata. Now, what we'll try to do in this section is to connect the Information Analyzer to the metadata that we just imported. So to do that, we need to go into Information Analyzer, which is under Information Server Console. Once I go in, I have to give the user ID and the password. I've also created a project called Address Profiling Project. It's very easy to create a project. I can just click on New Project, and so I'll just show you New Project. And you've got two types of projects. So whenever you create an Information Analyzer, you have to choose Information Analyzer project over here. So since I've already done that, I'm not going to do that again, but I did want to show that to you. Now notice that I have not opened the project yet. So over here it says no project selected. So before I do open the project, I need to go to Home, make sure that I go to Metadata Management, and I go to Import Metadata. So when I go to Import Metadata, I've got all of these data sources which are on this server, which is RHEL7 to IAS115. So the table, the database that I used was DB2 PR3. So I go into that, and as you can see, there are two different schemas. So there's an address schema. So you might get confused that, hey, I already created address, so that is the one. But no, so that address over there is not the one that we created. So the one that we created is over here under STUD01. So I choose this address, which is over here. Now what I'm also going to do is, just so that you do know what to do, I click on import metadata, and it will ask me that to import the metadata you must use import metadata asset manager. So I click import metadata, and it goes back to IMAM, which we have already done. So whatever we did over there, we can do that again, but in this case, since I've already done that earlier, I don't need to do that. I just come back to Information Analyzer and I say refresh metadata workspace. So as you can see, once I do that, my address is over here. I click on it, I can view metadata. So these are the different columns which I have. Okay, so I click close. So this is an important step to make sure that my sources are defined. To repeat the steps that I did to make it possible, I went to IMAM, I created a new import area, I created a new data connection, and then I did an express import which had problems. So I reshared to the metadata repository, and then I went to Information Analyzer where I imported metadata which took me back to IMAM. Since I had already done it, I did not do anything again, and I clicked on the button refresh metadata workspace, and that's how I get the latest data and metadata. So the metadata is stored in the repository. We'll see how data is used to profile. So once we have done that, now we can open the project. So let's see which projects. I say open project. So I've got this project for this purpose called address profiling project. I click open. So this is a brand new project which I just created. So I've not done anything on that project. So what are some of the things that we need to do? So remember that this particular project has been created to profile the data. So we need to make sure that we have got all the sources defined. Okay, so let's see. So I go to overview, project properties. So this gives me the detail of this project. The name of the project is address profiling project. It's an information analyzer project. I can also set rules, enable drill down security, which is important. But right now I will not do that for a specific reason. I can also set purge data rules and rule set output files, which also I'm not going to do right now. So I do need to add the sources. So to add the sources, I have to find out which source it is. So if you remember, it was stud01 address. So I'm going to just click on address and I say OK. Okay. So once I have added this, you come over here, you can see that. And then I do save all. Okay. If I want to add more sources, I can do that. I want to make sure that the right users, so IS admin should have all the privileges. So I'm going to give all the privileges. This can't be done unless you have got an admin access. So if you do not have admin access, you might have to talk to somebody. Groups, I don't care. Right now I have not created a group. For analysis engine, these are the default engines which are generally good by default. It would also be a good idea. So let me just make some changes over here. So I do want to give credentials. I validate setting just to make sure that the user IDs and passwords are all correct. And once I've done that, let's see what are the next steps. So I also go to the analysis database, but I want to make sure that everything is correct. So it would be a good idea to validate. Another step which I forgot to mention, and I did not do it today because I had already done it earlier, but this would be very, very critical for anybody who's doing column analysis for the first time. Just as what I did to import my data source, which was the address table, you also have to do the same thing for IADB database. So let me repeat what I mean. You need to go to IMAM, which is InfoSphere Asset Manager, and you need to create an import area for IADB, which is Information Analysis Database. And then you need to make sure that all the steps are done, and then we also need to define the sources, which I have not done, so I'm going to do that again. So at least a part of that you can see. So in the data sources I also need to add IADB, because all the analysis is done in IADB. So I just add that, I click OK, and I save all. So this step cannot be done unless you go to InfoSphere Asset Manager and you create an import area for IADB, and make sure that you are able to get the metadata from IADB and share it to the repository. If you do not do that, this would not be available over here and you would not be able to add it. So make sure that you take those steps, otherwise you will have problems when you come to actual analysis. Okay, so with that, let's see. So now I have made sure everything is good. Now I go back to the project and I've set the properties. I go to investigate and I do choose column analysis. So this is very tricky. I've had a lot of issues trying to increase this point in the past, so I've not tested this again for this specific one. So I hope everything is working, but even if it does not work, we know exactly what we have to do. So I go to db2 PR3 stud01 and I go to this table, and my goal today is to perform a column analysis on this table. So I click on run column analysis and let's see what happens. So whenever you do a column analysis, it kicks off a backend data state job using the project analyzer project, and you can actually set options. Under options you can say retain script, so you can actually look at, if there's an error, you can look at the error log by retaining script. So right now, let's see, I'm not going to retain script. So this, when I check this box, if there's any error, it will leave the log in the director logs for analyzer project. So let's be optimistic right now. Let's hope that I do not have to do any troubleshooting. But if I do have to do any troubleshooting, we know exactly what to do. So let's click submit and close. So this kicks off my column analysis. I've got a ton of data over there, so it might take some time.